Nevada waterfowl hunting zones by Craig Mortimer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, I'm Craig Mortimore. I'm the Migratory Game Bird Staff Biologist with the Game Division. We prepared a report for you, inserted it within your commission materials. It's available on the website to all. This report was precipitated by a request offered up by the Elko County Advisory Board at your August meeting. The request specifically asked for an investigation into the possibility of creating a new zone for northeastern part of the state to accommodate different season lengths up there. This was also precipitated on the fact that we had a much later opening date for ducks this year than we normally have. The content of this report is described in brief for you in the first paragraph, and the summary right there. Below that, a one-sentence summary says, and I'll just quote it for the audience now, NDOW desires to discuss this issue with the affected counties, but cannot institute any zoning changes until the 2011 hunting season. The reason for that is described within the body of this report. All things having to do with the season and bag limits for waterfowl hunting, all migratory game bird hunting for that matter, are undertaken through a very rigorous process that involves all the jurisdictions that share these migratory resources, the jurisdictions of different countries, the jurisdictions of all 50 states, through a very, I don't want to say it's an arduous process, but it's a process that works very well. So we have to follow certain guidelines and restrictions which are attendant to the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I'm not going to bore you or the audience on what those are. They are described in there. There's also some background information on the historical application or configuration of zones within the state of Nevada, and a very brief description of where the distribution of hunters are in this potential zone. For the sake of discussion at this point, it is not a proposal by the Department of Wildlife. At this point, the Department of Wildlife does not intend to propose a new zone, but we do intend to gather input from the affected interests, our participants and stakeholders that do value the waterfowl resources, particularly in northeastern Nevada. We have a very long season afforded to us in the Pacific Flyway. It's 107 days long. Normally, we open the duck season on the first or second Saturday of October. I prevailed upon the sportsmen this year to open it later than that because we wanted to, our intent was to capture pintails. In order to do that, we had to go as far as we could into October, and regulations don't allow us to put out bait prior to 2 weeks before the season. So our waterfowl season this year is partially predicated on that request on our part, plus a desire by many of the commissioners that attended, or excuse me, not commissioners, many of the attendees of our summit meetings that requested that we run the season as late as possible this year to take advantage of returning migration. So the most important part of this report for you guys is on the last page under the timeline. What we intend to do at this time is simply a notification to you guys what our intents are. In August, we will gather information at the two summit meetings we have, one in Las Vegas, one in Lahontan Valley. I will attend the County Advisory Board meetings for White Pine County, Elko County, Lincoln County, and Clark County during the August period in order to personally convey what this entails, and we'll gather input at that time. We'd still be a year away from implementing anything because of the restrictions under the guidelines for establishing zones. So at that time in August, if we find that there is enough interest behind us to have a zoning change in northeastern Nevada, we would forward that to the Flyway. Then it becomes a bit more of an arduous process. This little report that we've attached to at this point is minuscule compared to what kind of data we'd have to put together to get this thing through, but it can be put through if we want to indeed have a zone. Once again, at this point in time, I tell you, the necessity for a zone change isn't there as long as we continue to open the duck season on the first or second weekend in October each year. And I'd be prepared to answer any questions from you or the audience.
Greg, do they lose opportunity up north in December, in the late, if do they lose it, freeze out? Does it really, in Frank Lake and that, do they lose opportunity up in there because they're so far north by doing this?
They do.
They do?
Mr. Chairman, just about everybody at the northern latitudes cannot take full advantage of a 107-day season. Got to Stillwater right now, a lot of that's frozen too. By Tuesday of next week, for any of you who are paying attention to our weather forecast, the whole thing's going to be frozen up. All the birds are going to be in Sacramento except for swans and geese that can stand on the ice. Fact of the matter is, the only portions of our state that can fully take advantage of a 107-day season is basically Clark County, which never freezes. And so that rationale for having an earlier season would apply not just to Elko County, but to all the counties in our northern latitudes, including Washoe County, for that matter.
Any questions, Commissioner Rain?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've seen a lot of positives to this change, and I don't see a whole lot of negatives other than, it'd be somewhat arduous and it's a lot of work to get it implemented. So, in the interest of, fairness and balance, is there any negatives to this? 'Cause I just haven't.
Commissioner Rain, there really hasn't been any negatives that have been brought to my attention. The only thing that I would point out to the proponents of a separate zone is that if we go back to establishing the duck season statewide on the first Saturday especially, or the second Saturday of October, there's really no necessity to go through this process to create a zone. A northeastern zone would allow us to open the season as early as the Saturday that is closest to September 24th. That's within the federal framework guidelines. The earliest date you can open it is that date. The latest date you can run a duck season is January 31st. By opening it on that last Saturday in September, you're effectively shutting off any opportunity to hunt waterfowl, including geese, in most of January. So there are trade-offs. These need to be explained. That's why I'll do a comprehensive public input process in August to make sure that everybody understands what the trade-offs are and what you'd be gaining before we ever go into the effort of putting a comprehensive report together to push it through the federal system.
Commissioner Beth?
Thank you, Chairman Lane. The Clark County, Lincoln County portion of this, is that still on?
That is one of the other elements in this report. I'm glad you brought that up. A person attending the Clark County, I should say the Southern Nevada Summit meeting last August, made a proposal that we take Lincoln County out of the Clark-Lincoln zone and reattach it to the rest of state zone. We've done this many times, as you can see in that first table within your report. And there is some merit to that in that those hunting areas within Lincoln County, specifically Key Pittman Wildlife Management Area and Pahranagat National Wildlife Refuge, those are utilized by southern sportsmen, particularly those from Las Vegas. It's not that far of a drive for them to go. If that was back in the rest of state zone, then youth hunters could take advantage of a youth hunt day prior to the general season and still take advantage of a youth hunting day at the end of the Clark zone hunting season. So there's one advantage for that, at least for our youth hunters. That's something we can implement without having to go through an arduous process.
Commissioner Cavan?
Craig, we did receive, I think, the commission received 3 emails. They were all in support, but could you be sure and
I have them all. They'll be part of the packet in August. We actually have more correspondence than the 3 that you received, so all of them, as Commissioner Rain pointed out, all of these positively supporting of it. But like once again, I want to explain the whole enchilada to the folks before we actually take any action.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Howell?
Mr. Mortimer, as I understand it, if you change it to the earliest possible season, really the only county that would be affected then would be Clark County. Is that what you said?
Clark County is in a zone that's separated from the rest of the state. The guidelines allow us, as I said earlier, the guidelines allow states to open their season as early as the last Saturday in September and close it as late as January 31st. Because we have a 103-day or 107-day long season, I have opted for the last several years to open the state on a statewide basis. But we can have a season that opens and closes at a different time for Clark and Lincoln County as it is right now versus the rest of the state. We haven't really had the need to do that because of these 107-day seasons. We have in the past, when we've had shorter days or shorter lengths of seasons, we've opened and closed the northern season differently than we have the season for Clark County. But once again, when we have this long liberal format afforded to us by the federal frameworks, there hasn't been any necessity to have a split season. That's not a fair statement. Different seasons for the different zones is what I meant to say.
Okay, thanks, Greg.